The decommissioned facility on Kepler Station smelled like industrial lubricant and broken dreams, which, considering it processed the military equipment of 17 different species, was probably accurate on multiple levels. Sergeant Major Crix Valdorn stood in Processing Bay 7, watching a zealothy technician wave a scanner over a combat suit with the enthusiasm of someone cataloging expired ration packs. Pre-quantum targeting systems, the technician muttered, his gill slits fluttering in what passed for disgust among his species. Kinetic projectile weapons. Analog tactical display. He paused at the shoulder-mounted memorial panel, where 23 names scrolled in steady rotation. What is this archaic data stream? Commanding officers, Crix said, not bothering to hide her amusement. Everyone I've outlived. The zealothy's secondary eyes widened. A reaction that never got old. You served under 23 different commanders? Served with distinction matters. Crix tapped the helmet's temple. Most species rotate their equipment faster than their personnel. Humans do the opposite. Inefficient, declared Administrator Quilex from across the bay, where he supervised the dismantling of a hegemony pulse rifle that had lasted exactly 18 months before its planned obsolescence kicked in. Your military doctrine defies economic logic. Crix watched the rifle's components get sorted into recycling bins. Beautiful weapon, really, probably cost more than her annual salary and performed marginally better than her grandfather's hunting rifle. Right up until its manufacturer-mandated failure date. Economic logic assumes replacement parts exist when you need them. The galactic hegemony maintained supply chains across 400 systems. Quilex said with the pride of someone who'd memorized corporate promotional materials. Replacement components arrive within standard cycles. Unless you're being shot at, modern conflicts rarely last longer than our warranty periods. Crix let that observation hang in the recycled air. She'd been in 3 wars that had outlasted the civilizations that started them, but explaining that as someone whose species measured military campaigns in quarterly reports seemed counterproductive. The processing bay's entrance chimed, and Lieutenant Voss stepped through with the confident stride of someone who owned impressive technology and believed it mattered. His uniform displayed rank insignia that shifted color based on ambient light. A neat trick that probably cost more than Crix's entire kit. Sergeant Major Valdorn? His accent carried the crisp efficiency of core world education. I have transfer orders. Crix accepted the data pad, noting how its surface immediately adapted to her biometrics. Impressive, wasteful, and completely unnecessary for displaying text. Thought I was getting processed for retirement. Change of plans. Voss glanced at the memorial display, where Colonel Martinez's name had rotated into view. Command has a final assignment. Let me guess. Consultation work. Teaching young officers why their great-great-grandfather's tactics still work. Something like that. Administrator Quilex approached with his scanner results. I'm afraid this equipment cannot be released for active duty. Our analysis indicates systemic obsolescence across all major components. Define obsolescence, Voss said. No quantum entanglement communication. No neural interface capabilities. No adaptive ammunition, no. Does it work? Crix interrupted. Quilex's gill slits fluttered again. Functionality is not the primary concern. Compatibility with modern warfare standards requires. Does it work? The administrator consulted his scanner with the defeated expression of someone forced to acknowledge reality. All systems show green status indicators. 47 years of green status indicators. Crix said, through the Centauri uprising, the vegan corporate wars, and that unpleasant business on Kepler 9, where half the hegemony's next-generation equipment shut down because someone forgot to update the firmware. Lieutenant Voss cleared his throat. The transport departs in 6 hours. Pack light. This is my light. Crick's gesture at the combat suit, where Captain Webb's name had just scrolled past. Good Officer Webb died when his adaptive ammunition decided to adapt into something completely different during a firefight. Where are we going? Hadron's Edge. Neutral observation mission. Quilex made a noise that sounded like someone gargling with regret. Hadron's Edge is contested by 3 separate factions. The Keth sovereignty claims mineral rights. The non-collective asserts colonization priority, and the Zephyr Assembly maintains it falls within their expansion corridor. Hence the neutral observation. Voss said, "With respect, Lieutenant," Crick said, watching Major Harrison's name appear on her memorial display. "In my experience, nobody sends neutral observers to active war zones. They send expendable assets with enough firepower to handle whatever diplomatic solutions prove insufficient." That's remarkably cynical. That's remarkably accurate. Crix began running final diagnostics on her suit systems, listening to familiar hum of components that had been built to outlast the conflicts they were designed for. "What aren't you telling me?" Lieutenant Voss smiled with the calculated warmth of someone following orders he didn't fully understand. "Nothing that won't become apparent once we arrive." In the background, another piece of hegemony equipment failed its decommission testing, its exotic matter containment field collapsing with sound like expensive disappointment. The technicians began the familiar process of explaining to their supervisors why 3 months of advanced engineering had lasted exactly 2 weeks in field conditions. Crix's memorial display cycled to General Patterson's name, killed when a command ship's AI became sentient and decided the war was philosophically unjustified. The suit's targeting system, meanwhile, maintained its lock on a maintenance drone across the bay, tracking its movement with the mechanical precision of something built by people who understood that complexity was the enemy of reliability. 6 hours, she said, more to herself than to Lieutenant Voss. Enough time to clean my weapons and update my will. Standard procedure for neutral observation? Standard procedure for staying alive long enough to find out what we're really doing there. The memorial display scrolled on, 23 names representing 23 different ways that advanced technology, superior tactics, and brilliant strategy could still get you killed when the universe decided to be unreasonable. Crix had outlived them all with equipment that, according to every expert analysis, shouldn't have worked past its first deployment. She was beginning to suspect that was exactly the point. The transport ship Meridian's passenger manifest read, "Like a weapons expo gone wrong." Crix counted 2 Keth Sovereignty battle monks in ceremonial power armor that hummed with enough energy to power a small city. 3 the non-collective cyber warriors whose neural implants blinked in patterns that probably violated several treaties. And a Zephyr Assembly combat specialist whose exoskeleton looked like it had been designed by committee and built by perfectionists. "Quite the retirement cruise," she muttered, settling into a jump seat that predated most of the other passengers' birth cycles. The Keth monk nearest her, designated by rank scarification as a battle prior, gestured at her chest plate with one gauntlet hand. "Ancient Terra, yes? We studied your species' primitive warfare methods during our tactical education cycles. Primitive's a strong word. Kinetic projectiles, chemical propellants, mechanical targeting systems." The battle prior's vocoder carried undertones of academic curiosity. "Your people's refusal to embrace quantum mechanics in warfare is quaint." Lieutenant Voss appeared from the forward compartment, looking like someone who'd spent the last hour receiving updates he wished he could unlearn. "Sergeant Major, if I could brief you on our actual destination parameters." "Let me save you some time," Crix said, watching her tactical display parse the ship's navigational data. Hadron's Edge isn't under siege. It's hosting a 3-way territorial dispute that's been stalemated for 8 months because nobody wants to commit to a ground campaign that might damage the mineral extraction infrastructure. Voss paused mid-stride. "How did you—" "My suit's been intercepting communication traffic since we left port. Amazing what you can pick up when your receivers don't automatically filter out irrelevant data streams. She tapped her helmet's communication array. Your people told me we were doing neutral observation. Their people, she nodded toward the assembled aliens, think they're being deployed for a joint peacekeeping operation. The ship's navigational computer believes we're delivering humanitarian supplies. The non-cyber warrior looked up from her neural interface calibration, optical implants cycling through spectrum analyses. Conflicting mission parameters indicate deliberate information compartmentalization, standard pre-combat protocol for expendable assets. Expendable? The battle prior scarification glowed brighter. The Keth's sovereignty does not deploy expendable forces. Everyone's expendable under the right circumstances, Crick said. Question is whether you know it beforehand. Lieutenant Voss activated a privacy screen around their seating area, a considerate gesture that fooled exactly nobody present. The situation on Hadron's Edge has evolved. Intelligence suggests all three factions have been receiving external military support. From who? That's what we're being sent to determine. The Zephyr combat specialist exoskeleton translated his speech into standard with mechanical precision. Our mission briefings indicated resource mediation, not intelligence gathering. This represents a significant operational scope modification. Welcome to military service, Crick said. Where the mission changes faster than the briefings, and the briefings change faster than anyone bothers to tell you. Her suit's threat assessment system chimed softly, parsing sensor data that the ship's main computers apparently considered unworthy of attention. 3 vessels had been shadowing them for the past 2 hours, maintaining positions that suggested coordination rather than coincidence. She kept this information to herself. No point alarming anyone until she understood what they were dealing with. Tell me about these external supporters, she said to Voss. Unknown actors providing advanced weaponry to all 3 factions simultaneously. Each side believed they have exclusive support agreements. The battle prior scarification dimmed to a thoughtful glow. Classic destabilization pattern. Someone profits from extended conflict, or someone wants to field test their military technology against multiple tactical doctrines simultaneously. The non-warrior added, her implants flickering with data processing activity. Crix's threat board updated again. The shadowing vessels had closed distance and were now broadcasting identification signals that her suit's database flagged as sophisticated forgeries. Lieutenant, you might want to consult with the ship's captain about our escort. What escort? The 3 ships that have been following us since the second jump point. The ones pretending to be merchant vessels, but maneuvering like attack cruisers. Voss went pale in a particular way that suggested his briefings had been even less complete than he'd let on. Ship's sensors haven't detected any. The Meridian's alert system finally caught up with reality, bathing the passenger compartment in amber warning lights. The ship's AI, speaking with the calm authority of something programmed never to panic, announced, all passengers report to designated emergency stations. We are receiving priority communication requests from multiple vessels claiming salvage rights to our cargo. Salvage rights. The Zephyr specialist exoskeleton cycled through defensive configurations. We have not yet crashed. They're getting ahead of themselves, Crick said, checking her weapon systems as the other passengers activated their various technological marvels. Neural links established connections. Quantum processors calculated optimal response patterns, and adaptive ammunition selected ideal configurations for ship-to-ship combat in a pressurized environment. Her rifle, meanwhile, loaded standard kinetic rounds and waited for someone to point at a target. Sergeant Major, Lieutenant Voss said, his voice carrying the strained quality of someone realizing his comfortable assumptions about military planning had been catastrophically optimistic. What's your assessment of our tactical situation? Crix watched a memorial display cycle through names. Officers who died because their equipment was too smart, their tactics too complex. Their strategies too dependent on systems that could be compromised, corrupted, or simply confused by circumstances nobody had predicted. My assessment is that someone wanted a field demonstration of different military technologies under actual combat conditions. And where the demonstration were the laboratory mice. The demonstration comes next. The ship's AI updated their status with mechanical cheerfulness. Incoming vessels have armed weapon systems and are requesting immediate surrender of all military personnel and equipment for inspection purposes. The assembled aliens began coordinating their response through quantum-encrypted channels, neural networks, and probability cascade systems that turned the passenger compartment into a light show of advanced tactical planning. Crix turned off her external communications and settled back to watch the show, her ancient rifle ready, and her memorial display scrolling steadily through the names of everyone who'd learned too late that sophistication was no substitute for reliability. Hadron's Edge looked like someone had taken a perfectly decent mining colony and used it for artillery practice. Crix crouched behind the remnants of a processing facility, watching 3 different armies demonstrate why advanced technology couldn't compensate for tactical stupidity. The Keth sovereignty forces had established positions on the northern ridge, their quantum disruptors creating impressive light shows that accomplished nothing except advertising their locations. The non-collective held the eastern approaches with adaptive weapons that kept adapting into configurations nobody had field-tested. The Zephyr Assembly controlled the southern valleys using probability-based targeting systems that calculated optimal firing solutions for situations that existed only in their computers. All 3 factions were losing to the terrain. Neutral observer position confirmed. Lieutenant Voss reported to the comm, his voice carrying across the battlefield from his command bunker 3 kilometers away. "What's your assessment?" "They're idiots," Crick said, watching a Keth warrior's power armor shut down for a software update in the middle of a firefight. "Professional, well-equipped, technologically superior idiots." A Danan cyber commander materialized from camouflage protocols 20 meters to her left, his optical implants cycling through threat assessments. "Human combatant, you are operated within designated neutral observation parameters. Withdraw to safe distances. Define safe. Beyond effective range of hostile weapon systems." Crix's tactical display highlighted 17 different firing positions with clear sight lines to the cyber commander's current location. According to my readings, that would be approximately 2 star systems away. The commander's implants flashed with data processing activity. "Your equipment registers as pre-quantum military technology. Threat assessment negligible. I appreciate the honesty." A Zephyr missile barrage screamed overhead, each projectile following probability calculations that had somehow concluded the optimal target was empty ground between all 3 armies. The explosions created dramatic craters that would look impressive in after-action reports and accomplished nothing tactically relevant. "Your species' approach to warfare puzzles our tactical analysts," the cyber commander continued, apparently convinced that Crix represented no immediate threat. "Kinetic projectiles lack the sophistication for modern battlefield requirements. They have one advantage over sophisticated systems, which is..." Crix shot him. The cyber commander's optical implants registered surprise for exactly the duration required for 7.62 millimeter rounds to cross 20 meters of space and impact his chest armor. His sophisticated defensive systems have been calculating optimal responses to quantum weaponry and adaptive ammunition, not to chunks of metal propelled by controlled explosions. "They work when you pull the trigger," Crix said to his twitching form. Her memorial display flickered, and for a moment she could have sworn she saw Lieutenant Colonel Hayes winking at her. Hayes had died when his AI advisor decided that tactical retreat was statistically optimal and shut down his weapons in the middle of an assault. The AI had been correct, mathematically speaking. Hayes had been dead, practically speaking. A Keth battle prior's voice boomed across the battlefield through amplified speakers. "Human combatant, You have violated neutral observer protocols. Explain your actions. Self-defense. Crix replied, taking cover as adaptive ammunition from the non-positions began adapting in her direction. Your ally was explaining how my weapons don't work. The non-collective are not our allies. They are temporary tactical partners in a limited engagement. My mistake. How are those quantum disruptors performing? A pause, during which several more Keth weapons shut down for mandatory maintenance cycles. Operational parameters remain within acceptable ranges. Acceptable for who? Crix moved positions, watching her threat display track movement patterns that suggested all three armies were using tactical doctrines designed by different species for different wars. The Keth favored overwhelming firepower, applied with mathematical precision. The Non relied on adaptive technology that responded to changing battlefield conditions. The Zephyr used probability analysis to predict optimal strategies. None of them had planned for an opponent whose primary tactical advantage was showing up and shooting back. Her calm crackled with Lieutenant Voss's voice. Sergeant Major, we're receiving communications from all three faction commanders requesting immediate consultation with human tactical advisors. Let me guess. They want to know why their superior technology isn't working. They want to know why you're still operational when their threat assessments indicated you should have been eliminated within the first engagement. Crix checked her ammunition count, noted her suit systems humming along at optimal efficiency, and watched her memorial displays cycle through names of officers who trusted their equipment more than their instincts. Tell them I've had good teachers. A Zephyr combat specialist emerged from digital camouflage, his exoskeleton calculating firing solutions with visible processing displays. Human operator, your tactical approach defies probability analysis. Our systems indicate your survival chances were 0.3% when engagement commenced. Math was never my strong subject. Yet you continue to function within combat parameters that should have resulted in immediate termination. Maybe your math is wrong. The specialist exoskeleton cycled through defensive configurations, each more impressive than the last. Our mathematical models incorporate 15,000 historical battle scenarios and real-time adaptive learning protocols. Crix shot him too. The exoskeleton's defensive systems have been optimized for threats that made sense. Energy weapons, guided projectiles, tactical nuclear devices. They hadn't accounted for someone who simply pointed a rifle and squeezed a trigger until the target stopped moving. 16,000 scenarios now, she said, watching the specialist suit attempt to calculate probability assessments for situations its designers had never considered. Lieutenant Voss's voice returned with a quality that suggested he'd been having conversations with people whose authority exceeded his clearance level. Sergeant Major, new orders from command. You're authorized to demonstrate human tactical capabilities to all three faction commanders simultaneously. Demonstrate how? By resolving their territorial dispute. Crix looked out over a battlefield where three armies were steadily defeating themselves through technological sophistication, tactical inflexibility, and the kind of strategic thinking that prioritized looking impressive over actually winning. Her memorial display showed Commander Rodriguez's name, killed when his adaptive camouflage adapted to the wrong environmental parameters and made him invisible to his own forces. Any particular method recommended? Command suggests you apply standard human military doctrine, which is break their stuff until they agree to stop fighting. Crix smiled, checked her weapon systems one final time, and began walking toward the center of the battlefield, where all three armies were positioned to demonstrate exactly why complexity was no substitute for competence. 3 weeks later, Crix found herself back in Processing Bay 7, but the atmosphere had changed considerably. Administrator Quilex approached her workstation with the careful reverence of someone handling archaeological treasures instead of military surplus. The Keth sovereignty has submitted formal requests for 12 human tactical advisors, he announced, consulting a datapad that flickered with urgent priority markers. The non-collective wants to establish a joint equipment development program. The Zephyr Assembly is offering exclusive mining rights on 17 worlds in exchange for consultation on simplified weapons architecture. Fascinating, Crick said, watching technicians carefully document every component of her combat suit instead of dismantling it. What happened to archaic and inefficient? Market conditions have shifted, Quilex admitted, his gill slits fluttering with what she'd learned to recognize as embarrassment. Recent field demonstrations suggest our assessment criteria may have been incomplete. Lieutenant Voss entered the bay carrying the relaxed posture of someone whose career prospects had recently improved. Sergeant Major, congratulations on your successful completion of the Hadron's Edge mediation. Mediation? Crix tested the word. Is that what we're calling it? The territorial dispute has been resolved. All three parties have agreed to joint development under human oversight. Casualties were minimal, infrastructure damage was negligible, and resource extraction can resume within standard operational timeframes. And the external supporters who are providing weapons to all sides. Voss smiled with genuine amusement. Turned out to be a hegemony defense contractor running an unauthorized field testing program. They've been fined appropriately, and their research division has been disbanded. A new technician, this one sporting hegemony military credentials, approached with scanning equipment that looked expensive enough to fund a small war. Ma'am, we like to perform detailed analysis on your targeting systems. Preliminary examinations suggest they maintain accuracy standards that exceed theoretical maximums for non-quantum enhanced platforms. They point where I aim them. Yes, but how do they compensate for gravitational variance, atmospheric density fluctuations, target movement prediction, and quantum uncertainty principles? They don't. I do. The technician stared at her as if she claimed the ability to violate physics through willpower alone. Manual calculation of ballistic trajectories during active combat scenarios is impossible for organic neural networks. Nobody told me it was impossible. Crix's memorial display cycled to a new entry. Lieutenant Voss, Operation Hadron's Edge. She blinked, then looked at the very much alive officer standing beside her. Problem with your display? She tapped the screen, which corrected itself immediately. The entry now read, Mission Parameters, Hadron's Edge Tactical Demonstration Status. Classified Success. Demonstration, she repeated slowly. Lieutenant Voss had the grace to look slightly sheepish. Command felt that certain galactic partners needed a practical illustration of human military capabilities. So the retirement, the transfer orders, the mysterious mission, carefully orchestrated to create optimal conditions for showcasing human tactical doctrine against multiple alien military approaches simultaneously. Administrator Quilex's gill slits fluttered faster. You mean this was planned? The entire engagement was a controlled demonstration. The territorial dispute was real, Voss said. The external interference was real. The combat was definitely real. We simply arranged for the right person to be in the right place to resolve the situation in a way that highlighted certain strategic advantages. Crix leaned back in her chair, watching technicians treat her 47-year-old rifle like a holy relic while they cataloged its impossibly effective, simple mechanical components. How long has Command been planning this? Since the Kepler-9 incident, when half the hegemony's advanced equipment failed, and you single-handedly held 3 defensive positions with weapons that should have been obsolete before you were born. Voss consulted his datapad. Your service record shows consistent performance advantages in situations where technological superiority proved inadequate. So instead of actual retirement, you get actual retirement with full honors, maximum benefits, and a consulting contract that pays more than most planetary governors make. He paused. Also, The Galactic Military Heritage Foundation wants to create a permanent exhibit featuring your combat suit. Heritage Foundation? They're buying the entire Processing Bay 7 facility, turning it into a museum dedicated to enduring military technologies throughout galactic history. Administrator Quilex made a sound like drowning in bureaucratic irony. We're being converted from a decommissioned facility into a preservation center. The galaxy's sudden interest in equipment longevity has created new market opportunities, Voss explained. Several species have requested human assistance in developing military technologies with operational lifespans measured in decades rather than fiscal quarters. A cargo transport docked at the facility's main port, and Crix watched through the observation windows as loading crews began transferring equipment that looked suspiciously familiar. Ancient pattern infantry rifles, mechanical targeting systems, kinetic ammunition, and what appeared to be several dozen combat suits that predated her own. "Let me guess," she said. "More gear arriving for decommission?" Lieutenant Voss followed her gaze to the cargo bay, where technicians were already setting up processing stations for new arrivals. Routine equipment evaluation, standard procedure, and the personnel arriving with that equipment? Experienced veterans being transitioned to advisory roles. Crix's memorial display flickered, cycling through 23 names of officers who trusted their lives to complexity, sophistication, and the promise that newer was always better. They died because their equipment was too smart to be reliable, their tactics too advanced to be practical, and their strategies too dependent on systems that could be compromised by circumstances nobody had predicted. She'd survived by carrying tools built by people who understood that the universe was an unpredictable place populated by unreasonable enemies who wouldn't follow the manufacturer's specifications. "Enjoy your retirement, Sergeant Major," Lieutenant Voss said, heading toward the cargo bay where the next demonstration was already being prepared. "You've earned it." Crix watched him go, then turned back to her memorial display, where a new message had appeared. "Mission complete. Equipment status. Proven effective recommendation. Continue production." Outside the observation windows, another transport approached, carrying what looked like enough obsolete human military equipment to outfit a small army. The universe, it seemed, was finally catching up to what her grandfather's rifle had known all along. Sometimes the old ways worked because they were the only ways that worked. The memorial display scrolled one final time, adding a 24th entry that made her smile. Galactic Military Doctrine status. Updated.